Nicknamed the Rhino, the Boeing Super Hornet has become the backbone of U.S. naval carrier-borne air power. Its versatility allows it to undertake a wide range of missions, including fleet defense, deep strike, close support, reconnaissance, in-flight refueling, and defense suppression. This multi-role capability is good news to the U.S. Navy in an era of declining defense budgets. The Super Hornet has allowed the Navy to reduce the number of types it operates, and its modern systems mean that it is much cheaper to operate than previous aircraft. While at first glance, the Super Hornet is very obviously derived from the earlier A-18 Hornet that has been a part of U.S. naval aviation since the 1980s, it is considerably larger, and the basic design has been evolved to a point where it is very much a different aircraft and much more capable. Today's Super Hornet has grown considerably from its genesis in a lightweight fighter competition, although its deck footprint is not that much greater than that of the legacy Hornet from which it is derived, and smaller than that of the Tomcat and Intruder it has replaced. By comparison with its main rivals, it is quite a large aircraft and tips the scales not much short of the weight of heavy fighters such as the F-15E. In performance terms, the Super Hornet generally matches its predecessor with a top-end speed of Mach 1.8. It has much better range characteristics, offering around 40% more range with nearly double the weapons load. Although only 35% heavier, it carries 50% more fuel. One area where the Super Hornet made dramatic improvements was in its ability to bring back ordnance to the carrier. The legacy Hornet's high approach speed meant that it could only land on a carrier with a minimal load, meaning that excess ordnance had to be jettisoned. The Super Hornet's big wing allows it to bring back a much bigger load, a major consideration in today's environment of expensive precision weapons. Carrier landing is considered even safer and easier than in the legacy Hornet, which was already the Navy's safest carrier-borne aircraft. Approach speed in the Super is around 10 knots lower, and the aircraft is stable yet responsive. At low speeds, the huge leading-edge root extensions and large control surfaces give the Super Hornet excellent maneuverability and controllability, and it has become a firm favorite of airshow crowds. By necessity of cost, carrier capability, and mission flexibility, the Super Hornet is something of a compromise. Reports suggest that it lacks an edge in some air defense scenarios, particularly in the transonic regime. However, it caters for any shortfalls by excellent sensors and weapons. At the Navy's behest, the Super Hornet has an extra pair of wing pylons compared with its predecessor, making 11 hardpoints in total. The aircraft has been cleared for a wide range of weapons, and its ability to easily adapt to asymmetric loadouts makes the variations almost infinite. The wingtip rails are retained for carrying short-range air-to-air missiles, while under each wing are 3 pylons, the inner 2 being for heavy stores. The fuselage has 2 shoulder stations for light weapons or sensor pods, while there is a centerline station for a heavy store. For air-to-air work, the Super Hornet carries 2 sidewinders on the wingtip launch rails. Initially, the A-9M was employed, but this has been superseded by the A-9X, with thrust vectoring and an imaging infrared seeker that can be slaved to the pilot's helmet-mounted sight. For longer-range engagements, the Super Hornet can theoretically carry up to 8 AIM-7 Sparrow singly on the wing and shoulder stations, although today this weapon has been completely supplanted by the AIM-120 AMRAAM. By using twin-rail launchers on the 4 inner wing stations, the Super Hornet can carry 12 of these active radar weapons. For short-range air-to-air work and for ground strafing, the Rhino retains the trusty M61 Vulcan cannon mounted in the nose behind the radar. Free-fall bombs can be carried from the wing and centerline pylons. The use of double racks allows up to 11 Mark 83 1,000-pounders to be carried, or a similar number of Mark 82 500-pounders. Carriage of 2,000-pound class weapons, like the Mark 84, is restricted to the 4 inner pylons. To leverage the Super Hornet's sophisticated systems, however, most ordnance would be guided. Laser-guided bombs such as the 500-pound GBU-12 pave way too, and the 1,000-pound GBU-16 are carried in much the same way as freefall weapons. Similarly, the Super Hornet can carry GPS-guided JDAMs, including the 500-pound GBU-38, 1,000-pound GBU-32, and 2,000-pound GBU-31. Guided missiles are carried singly from the wing pylons and include up to 6 AGM-65 Mavericks for short-range precision attack. Up to 6 AGM-88 HARM missiles can be carried for defense suppression missions against hostile radar emitters. An alternative is the GPS-guided AGM-154 JSOW, which can be used for attacks against a variety of pinpoint targets, including radar sites whose position is known. For standoff precision attacks, the Super Hornet can employ the AGM-158 JASM, and this, the AGM-84H SLAM-ER. This weapon is an outgrowth of the Harpoon anti-ship missile, also carried by the Super Hornet. It uses an imaging infrared seeker in the nose that can relay back imagery to the launch aircraft via a data link, allowing the target to be designated. For air policing duties, the Super Hornet's flexibility allows it to carry a mixed load of weapons so it can handle a range of targets as and when they emerge. For instance, an aircraft could carry sidewinders and an AMRAAM for air targets, a HARM for attacking a radar, Mavericks for anti-armor work, and GPS and laser bombs together with a designation pod for other ground targets. Initially, the Super Hornet entered service with a similar avionics suite to that in the last of the A-18C Legacy Hornets. The heart of the system is the APG-73 Phase 2 radar, a mechanically scanned unit with synthetic aperture capability. From Block 2, Super Hornets are being delivered with the APG-79 Active E-Scan radar. Developed by Raytheon, the APG-79 features a fixed array of individual transmit-receive modules. The array is angled upwards so that the array itself does not become a major source of radar reflectivity. The APG-79 allows the formation of very narrow, highly agile beams. It can discriminate between closely spaced air targets at long range or can produce high-resolution detail of ground targets. The patch map capability of the APG-79 is extraordinary, as shown here. Using electronic scanning rather than mechanical allows the radar to rapidly intercut between different modes. The changes are so rapid that to the crew it appears that they are operating concurrently. In the FA-18F two-seater, the pilot can work the radar in air-to-air mode, while the back-seater can use it for air-to-surface work simultaneously. The antenna can also operate as a passive device to detect hostile emissions, and can also be used as a communications device for rapidly transmitting and receiving large electronic files such as patch maps and infrared images. Backing up the radar in the air defense role is an advanced identification friend or foe system, the antennas for which are mounted above the aircraft's nose. Like its predecessor, the Super Hornet can carry podded infrared and laser designation systems such as the AAS-38B Nighthawk. However, it normally employs the Raytheon ASQ-228 AT FLIR. This is a third-generation system that incorporates a highly advanced mid-wave infrared imager that provides the system with much greater slant range capability than previous systems. A key advantage is the ability to provide accurate GPS coordinates for JDAM and JSOW attacks. As well as its targeting functions, AT FLIR gives the Super Hornet a significant reconnaissance capability. But for dedicated surveillance missions, it uses the Shared Reconnaissance Pod, or SHARP. This is carried on the centerline and houses a Recon Optical CA295 camera in a rotating mount. As well as its impressive offensive systems, the Super Hornet is also well defended and well connected. Defenses include an ALR-67 radar warning receiver system, internal jammers, and towed radar decoys that lure radar-guided missiles away from the aircraft. The decoys deploy from between the engine trunks on the underside. In addition to the normal jam-resistant radios, the Super Hornet is equipped with the MIDS LVT data link that allows the aircraft systems to share tactical information with other platforms. The original Hornet marked a major landmark in fighter cockpit design, and the basic layout and interface concept remains in use in a number of current warplanes. It was no surprise, therefore, that the Super Hornet employed the same basic design, albeit with numerous improvements. The crew sits on Martin Baker SJU-56 ejection seats that offer full protection down to zero airspeed at zero altitude. The front cockpit of the FA-18F is the same as that of the single-seat FA-18E. There is a wide-angle head-up display for showing relevant flight and targeting data without the need for the pilot to look into the cockpit during a fight. To facilitate this, the cockpit has full hands-on throttle and stick functionality. Below the HUD is an upfront controller display, or UFCD. This is a touch-sensitive active matrix liquid crystal display that replaces a keypad in the legacy Hornet's cockpit. As well as being used for data entry, it can also be used as a secondary display. Below the UFCD is the main tactical screen, known as the multi-purpose color display. This is typically used to show a moving map, with aircraft position and tactical information overlaid. Either side of the UFCD are two further screens known as Digital Display Indicators, or DDIs. These screens are used to display a wide range of data, ranging from aircraft checklists and system status through to radar displays and sensor imagery. Below the left-hand DDI is a fifth screen that is normally used to display engine status. Below the right-hand DDI is a backup analog flight instrument panel. A small sloping panel on the right includes a master warning display, while the right-hand console has various system switches that are not critical during battle. The left side console also has system switches, including external fuel tank controls, and mounts the twin throttles. The left-hand sloping panels include a master stores jettison switch and the undercarriage lever. In the rear cockpit, the weapons systems officer has a similar screen arrangement. There are no flight controls, but the backup flight instruments are repeated, as are some safety critical controls. The MPCD is larger, allowing the backseater to plot and monitor the tactical situation in greater detail. The rear cockpit also has the two DDIs and engine display screen. Although as the two cockpits are completely decoupled, the backseater can display different information than what is being shown in the front. The UFCD is also included, normally being used to repeat the data from the pilot's head-up display. There are two hand controllers to provide the backseater with the same HOTAS functionality as the pilot. The Super Hornet is considerably larger and heavier than its predecessor, so it required new engines. The original General Electric F404 had proven to be a good performer and very reliable, so it was natural to scale it up for the Super Hornet, the result being the F414. Many of the improvements cascaded from the F412 engine planned for the cancelled A-12. The F414 is dimensionally similar to the F404 and fits neatly into the rear fuselage, easily accessible for maintenance or replacement. While the Super Hornet is far from a stealthy design, there is much evidence of radar cross-section reducing measures. The most notable of these are the angular intakes that reduce the number of radar spikes to a minimum. Inside the intake trunk is a radar blocker, a device that prevents radar energy reaching the engine compressor face without impeding airflow too much. Bleed air from the intake is ejected through an angular port in the top of the wing. One of the key drivers behind the Super Hornet was increased range, and the fuselage was lengthened to house more fuel in two large tanks that occupy most of the central fuselage structure between the cockpit and the engines. This capacity is reduced in the two-seat FA-18F. The larger wings of the Super Hornet also provide increased fuel capacity. The aircraft can also carry an impressive external fuel load, with the centerline and four inner wing hardpoints being plumbed for fuel tanks. A new 480-gallon tank was developed for the Super Hornet. The Super Hornet now routinely operates in the tanker role. The so-called 5-wet configuration has 4 large tanks on the wing, plus a refueling pod on the centerline. As well as containing a hose drogue unit, the refueling pod also houses additional fuel. The undercarriage design is essentially the same as that of the legacy aircraft, albeit beefed up to cater for greater weights. It was also designed to give greater ground clearance to allow the carriage of a 480-gallon tank or refueling pod on the centerline. A sturdy arrestor hook is mounted under the rear fuselage, treated with radar-absorbent material as it was found to be a major radar hotspot. Control surfaces are also similar to the FA-18C, comprising rudders on the twin fins for yaw control. They are towed in during takeoff and landing to provide a nose-up trimming effect. The wings mount full-span leading-edge flaps for high lift at low speeds and when maneuvering. On the trailing edge of the fixed portion of the wings are large single-slotted flaps that deploy to 45 degrees for maximum lift generation. The outboard wing sections have single-slotted flaperons. They provide some roll control, but also droop with the flaps to increase lift for landing. Roll control is also provided by the differential movement of the huge all-moving tailerons. Mounted well back on the aircraft, the tailerons also provide excellent pitch authority when moved symmetrically. The Super Hornet introduced two new control surfaces, with small spoilers being added on top of the leading-edge root extensions. These spoilers improved nose-down control authority. When raised in combination with lowering the flaps and flaperons, the spoilers also provided an effective means of increasing drag, allowing the deletion of the Legacy Hornet's dedicated dorsal air brake. For carrier operations, the wings are hydraulically folded. With the A-6 Intruder long gone from US carrier decks, and the F-14 Tomcat becoming increasingly difficult and costly to maintain, the US Navy wasted no time in getting the Super Hornet into service, accelerating the retirement of the Tomcat in the process. VFA 122 was the first squadron to receive the aircraft in November 1999. Stationed at Lemoore in California, the Flying Eagles became the first training unit for the Super Hornet. Subsequently, a second schoolhouse was established at Oceana in Virginia. By late 2000, the first frontline unit, VFA 115, was ready for conversion, receiving single-seat FA-18Es. With these aircraft, the squadron took part in the latter stages of Operation Enduring Freedom in the summer of 2002, although they did not drop weapons. However, they did drop JDAMs over Iraq in November that year in the run-up to the major Allied air campaign in March 2003. VFA 115 was heavily involved in Operation Iraqi Freedom and was joined by VFA 41 Black Aces and VFA 14 Top Hatters in the later stages. The Super Hornet has played an important part in subsequent Iraqi operations, the AT-FLIR sensor proving particularly useful in supporting ground forces. New squadrons joined the fleet with great rapidity thereafter, the Navy assigning one FA-18E squadron and one FA-18F unit to each carrier air wing to replace the F-14 units. The new air wing makeup included the two Super Hornet squadrons plus two of FA-18Cs. The S-3 Viking fleet also began to retire as the Super Hornet took up the burden of in-flight refueling. With the replacement of the Tomcat complete by 2006, the main focus turned to re-equipping some FA-18C units. In 2008, VFA 213 goes to sea with the first APG-79 equipped Block II aircraft. From 2009, the EA-18G will replace the EA-6B Prowler. The Super Hornet is in contention for a number of export orders. The first customer to sign for the type is Australia, which is buying 24 FA-18Fs to replace its elderly F-111 long-range strike aircraft. In terms of mission versatility, no aircraft can rival the Super Hornet. The aircraft has taken the existing capabilities inherent in the earlier A-18 and amplified them, while adding a whole new range of duties that it can perform. A high-capacity central computer system combined with a wide range of weapons and podded systems provides the carrier air wing commander with a range of role choices, all in one aircraft. As a replacement for the Tomcat, the Super Hornet had to perform the air defense mission. Adequate performance, a good radar, long loiter capability, and good combat persistence are needed for this role, and the Super Hornet answers the call. By using twin-rack launchers on 4 of its wing pylons, the aircraft can carry up to 12 AMRAAMs, the highest number of beyond visual range missiles carried by any fighter. The air defense mission can be broken down into 3 main tasks. Firstly, there is fleet defense, protecting the carrier and its battle group from aerial attack. This may involve Super Hornets mounting an outer screen of combat air patrols, or maintaining a high readiness state on the carrier to launch at a moment's notice to intercept possible attackers. There is strike escort, in which the Super Hornets fly along with an attack package to protect them from hostile fighters. They may fly ahead of the package to clear the target area prior to the arrival of the strikers, or fly with them throughout their mission. Finally, there are air defense missions in which aircraft are used for a variety of more general missions, such as maintaining combat air patrols along a border during times of tension, or sanitizing a sector of airspace to support the imposition of a no-fly zone. An impressive weapons repertoire, high survivability, and 7 main stores carrying hardpoints allows the Super Hornet to undertake the entire range of air-to-surface duties. Large numbers of small precision-guided weapons make it an impressive close support tool. And the impressive sensors and good connectivity make it an excellent platform from which to control the operations of other close support aircraft, especially in the 2-seat FA-18F variant. The Super Hornet's survivability and ability to carry heavy standoff weapons, such as the SLAM-ER, allow it to perform deep strike missions into heavily defended airspace. And with the Harpoon, it has a potent anti-ship capability too. More specialized roles can also be undertaken, such as defense suppression using the HARM and JSOW weapons. And reconnaissance with the Sharp pod. The aircraft's good lifting capability and 5 plumbed hardpoints has meant that it is now the fleet's primary tanker asset, and one that can accompany other strike aircraft at their normal speeds. With the Super Hornet, the US Navy carrier Air Wing now has the ability to mount a complex mission involving many different tasks with just one aircraft type. Changing role is as simple as changing weapons and stores and briefing the crew accordingly. In current operations undertaken in conjunction with the FA-18C or Legacy Hornet, the Supers are naturally used more for the high-end missions, such as deep strike, forward air control and reconnaissance, while the older, less capable aircraft are tasked with the less demanding roles. The interchangeability of weapons between the types makes the process of organizing operations much easier than before. Furthermore, the Super Hornet can multitask like no naval aircraft before it. The routine use of asymmetric loadouts allows the type to excel in general air policing missions, for which it can carry a mix of weapons to meet a range of eventualities. That the US Navy operates the Super Hornet today is the result of a protracted procurement saga that stretches back into the free-spending days of the Cold War. Faced with the impending obsolescence of its main attack type, the Grumman A-6 Intruder, and its main fighter, the Grumman F-14 Tomcat, the US Navy had a number of projects underway in the mid-1980s. Re-engined and modernized versions of both types were being developed as the A-6F and the F-14D. While at the same time it was procuring large numbers of A-18C Hornets. To add to the burden, a major stealthy attack aircraft program had been launched in the form of the General Dynamics McDonnell Douglas A-12 Avenger II, and there was Navy interest in the program that eventually produced the F-22. Even in the Reagan years, there was simply not enough money to fund all this activity. The A-6F was cancelled and the F-14D program was slashed. In 1991, with the Cold War ended, the troubled A-12 was also cancelled. Nevertheless, the Navy had to pursue new aircraft development to ensure the continued viability of its carrier force. While Grumman continued to offer multi-role versions of the Tomcat, McDonnell Douglas was working on advanced Hornet derivatives. As major political events played out in Eastern Europe with major budgetary repercussions in Washington, a cheap Hornet derivative appeared increasingly attractive, and the Super Tomcat fell by the wayside. By 1992, and almost by default, the Hornet was the only game in town. The future of the carrier fleet now rested on the success or failure of the program. The Super Hornet that serves the US Navy today can trace its heritage back to the Northrop F-5, a lightweight fighter with straight wings and closely spaced twin engines. This basic layout was then employed in the P-530 Cobra design, which added twin fins and long leading-edge root extensions that provided extra lift at low speeds and high angles of attack. The P-530 was not built, but when the US Air Force launched its lightweight fighter competition in 1972, the design was further refined to produce the Northrop YF-17. This aircraft showed considerable promise in the competitive fly-off with the General Dynamics YF-16, especially in the low-speed regime, where the aircraft's configuration gave it an edge in maneuverability. Nevertheless, it was outperformed in many other areas, and the F-16 was ordered for the Air Force. The US Congress had directed that the Navy select one of the two lightweight fighter competitors for its own new combat aircraft program. At the time, the Navy insisted that its contractors had previous experience of building Navy aircraft, so Northrop teamed with McDonnell Douglas to offer the YF-17, with the St. Louis Company taking the main responsibility for the naval product. General Dynamics teamed with Vought to offer a navalized F-16. In May 1975, McDonnell Douglas was declared the winner. The twin-engined configuration played a significant part in the Navy's decision. After a major redesign, the YF-17 became the F-A-18 Hornet, which first flew in November 1978. The type was procured in large numbers for the US Navy and Marine Corps. While elements of the design, such as the General Electric F-404 engine, radar and cockpit, proved highly successful, there were issues with the Hornet. The most notable was a considerable deficiency in range and warload compared to what had been promised. The poor payload range performance played a major part in subsequent McDonnell Douglas development studies and were central to the development of the Super Hornet. From 1987, the St. Louis Company embarked on a series of studies to improve the Hornet under the catch-all Hornet 2000 label. The least ambitious design was based on uprated engines, and this was hastened into production as the FA-18C. The most ambitious was an advanced arrow-winged canard design. However, the design that increasingly showed the most promise and which became the most attractive as the budgetary constraints tightened was an enlarged aircraft with a bigger wing and much greater internal fuel capacity that redressed the range problems of the legacy aircraft. Initially, McDonnell Douglas hoped to simply scale up the FA-18C as closely as possible, but aerodynamic considerations and revised Navy requirements rendered this a dead end. As development progressed, the new Super Hornet increasingly diverged from the earlier aircraft to the point where commonality was reduced to less than 10%. Key changes were the lengthening of the fuselage to provide space for more fuel and more avionics, plus room for future growth. The wings were around 25% larger, and the leading edge sweep was increased. A dogtooth was added. The wings were made thicker and stiffer to allow the addition of an extra weapons pylon. The leading-edge root extensions were dramatically increased in size to restore low-speed agility and given a more curved plan form. The tailplanes were similarly enlarged, and the curved edges were made angular. The intakes were changed from a semicircular design to a much more stealthy trapezoidal shape. There were considerable internal structural differences, the Super Hornet having a center fuselage barrel of titanium alloy rather than aluminium, and much of the skin was made of composites rather than metal. McDonnell Douglas received a go-ahead for the program in May 1992, with formal congressional approval following in June. The formal contract for 5 single-seat FA-18Es and a pair of 2-seat FA-18F trials aircraft was placed in December, also covering 3 ground test airframes. On the 18th of September 1995, the first FA-18E was rolled out at St. Louis, from where it undertook its maiden flight on the 29th of November. The first 2-seater flew on the 1st of April 1996. In 1997, McDonnell Douglas became part of Boeing. Initial flight tests progressed relatively smoothly, but when the tests became more demanding, problems arose. An uncommanded wing drop phenomenon had to be corrected by fitting porous wing fold joints at some cost in range, while weapon separation problems led to the underwing pylons being towed out by 3 degrees, again with a drag and range penalty. With these and other problems cured, development progressed relatively smoothly, much of the work being performed at the US Navy's main test center at Patuxent River. Here, Super Hornets were rigorously checked up for their carrier landing characteristics, especially from unusual off-normal situations. In 1999, the first Super Hornets were delivered to the training squadron. Initial deliveries were of an interim Block 1 aircraft, which retained a mechanically scanned radar. From 2007, Block 2 aircraft have been delivered with an active electronically scanned antenna radar. The only other major variant so far is the A-18G Growler, a 2-seater optimized for the electronic warfare and defense suppression roles. The EA-18G inherits some of the jamming systems from the aircraft it will replace, the Grumman EA-6B Prowler. However, in the EA-18G, The system is repackaged and combined with much more advanced processing systems so it can be operated by a single crew member. The first aircraft flew on the 15th of August 2006, and the Growler is due to enter the fleet in 2009.
可変翼の超音速爆撃機 B1、 B52 の後継機として開発されたものの、一時は計画がキャンセルされました。しかし B1B ランサーとして復活し、今日のアメリカ空軍の貴重な爆撃戦力となっています。興味深い多くの技術が取り入れられた B1 を詳しく解剖します。次号もぜひお買い求めください。